Welcome to Pontification Nation. I'm your host, Ricky Skittle, coming to you live, as always, from my mother's basement. And we have another great show lined up for you today. We're going to continue talking about Bob Mueller, why he's a corrupt criminal, and how Donald Trump is exerting leverage on him to achieve a goal. So, where we left off, Donald Trump is executing a plan using leverage. The leverage is the Uranium One scandal and probably a whole host of other things that he has on these people. And he is using that to control them so that he can get an investigation done. Bob Mueller, Rod Rosenstein, corrupt criminals. Donald Trump has known this since at least November 17th, 2016. In order to investigate the actual crimes and treason committed by our government, Trump must first be investigated and exonerated. He must be investigated by people who have a near unanimous support from the swamp. Donald Trump has all the information. We do not, because of the NSA. And this plan does not come without risk, as the double agents could turn at any moment, but the leverage keeps them in check. Now, to be fair, I didn't think I really needed to talk about this, but as I'm thinking about it, I want to make sure that we're fair. It's also very possible that Rod Rosenstein brought Mueller into the Oval Office in order to get him read in on the subject before appointing him as special counsel. It's very possible that Bob Mueller is a corrupt criminal and Trump does not have leverage on him. I don't think these are probable, but that's the story that we get, is that Bob Mueller is this great patriot and, Rod Rosenstein is the only person protecting us from a Russian dressing invasion on all of our salads. Because once Russia comes in, there's only one dressing. In any case, I was going to start this in a different way, but I came across this little tidbit that is frankly just amazing. So we have to start talking about this before we start talking about what we're going to talk about next, which is generally about the Bob Mueller investigation, who he is indicting, and why it all smells to high heaven, in my mind, from my perspective, in my opinion. But first, let's talk about some factual things. This is an article from the Epoch Times, which I will link in the description. It's too long to go through the whole thing, but it is about, so right now, as we discussed, there are a lot of leaks coming out of the congressional testimony that's been going on over the past couple of years. And in my mind, this is because they want to start getting bits and pieces of this story out to people, because I think when the whole story breaks, it is going to be a shock, not only to the United States system, but to the world system, because we know that this is not just the United States government that was involved in this election meddling. There's Australia, there's the UK, Europe, who knows who else. So there's going to be a lot of issues that are going to need to be dealt with in a public and private manner when a lot of this stuff starts to come out, which I believe will start happening soon, because I think that Rod Rosenstein is leaving when Mueller is done, because I believe that was part of the plan. So this is from Tricia Anderson, who was an attorney in the FBI General Counsel's office. She reported to James Baker, and he was the head attorney, general counsel for the entire FBI. Now, there's a couple things in here that I think are very relevant to what I'm going to talk about today. So I want to start with this article because it's fresh news and just came out yesterday. So this is in response to a question about the Carter Page FISA and the approval process. So in response to that question, Mrs. Anderson says, all necessary approvals, including up through and including the leadership of the FBI and the leadership of the department, by the time I put that signature on the cover page, had already been obtained. Now they're asking, this is the first Carter Page FISA. I don't know if this is the first FISA that got declined or if it's the actual Carter Page FISA in October that got approved, but it's probably the one in October that got approved. These early high-level approvals were distinctly outside the normal FISA process. Anderson and others were supposed to have provided approvals before the FISA was presented to senior FBI and DOJ officials. Anderson appeared to be fully aware of the uniqueness of this particular application process. There were individuals all the way up to the deputy director and the deputy attorney general on the DOJ side who had essentially given their approval to the FISA before it got to that step in the process. That part of it was unusual, and so I didn't consider it my review at that point in the process to be substantive in nature. Anderson told congressional investigators that with the regard to the Page FISA, by signing off, she was simply signaling, yes, this package is ready to go forward. So now, the FISA spy warrant, which we already know is a sham warrant full of garbage from the dossier, is getting approved at higher levels and then sent back down to lower level people to be signed off on. That doesn't make any sense. What that signals to me is the boss didn't want the lower level people really reading it, so they just signed off on it because it was already signed off on. So what are they going to add? They can't tell their boss, oh, you can't sign off on this. They tell the people who bring it to them, oh, we can't sign off on this. You need to fix that. Now, Anderson attempted to provide an explanation for the unusual process, noting, we understood because of who Carter Page was, that people would second guess the appropriateness of submitting the FISA application, and so we were taking extra care with the application itself. Yet at the same time, Anderson admitted that not only had she not read the original Page FISA application, but she was also unable to recall if she had read any of the Carter Page FISA renewals. This is huge. Because of who Carter Page was. Now this statement could mean many different things. It could simply mean because Carter Page was a junior, do-nothing, know-nothing advisor at the campaign who only talked with spies from the UK, the helper, that this would be a second-guess thing. Or it could be because of other reasons that I'm actually going to get into and discuss of why I think this Carter Page thing is weird and not normal. It's not normal. What happened with the Carter Page FISA and who Carter Page is, none of it is normal. And we're going to talk about that later, so make sure you stick around. Now I literally was going to make this video last night, and I was exhausted. And I couldn't talk, and it really, I did like 4 takes, and it really wasn't interesting, and I wasn't having a good time, and so I put it off till today, and I really think that was the Lord giving me this article later so that I could talk about it, because this is really, a lot of this is what I'm talking about in this video. Anderson defines spy. Trump, on several occasions, has made reference to a spy placed within his campaign. We know the FBI used Stefan Halper as a government informant in relation to his contacts with the Trump campaign advisors George Papadopoulos and Carter Page, but the FBI has denied the use of an actual spy. Anderson also stated that she had no knowledge of a spy, but was later asked to define her understanding of the word. Mr. Breitenbach, does a spy in your mind include a human confidential source? Mrs. Anderson, no. Breitenbach, does a spy include an undercover FBI employee? I don't know. After more questioning, Anderson provided her reasoning in stating that there had been no spy in the Trump campaign. First, the word spy, quote unquote, did not seem commensurate with what I understood had been done in this particular case. And the other thing was the verb, the use of the verb place a spy or place a source within a campaign. To my knowledge, the FBI did not place anybody within a campaign, but rather relied upon its network of sources, some of whom had campaign contacts, including the source that has been discussed in the media at some length beyond Christopher Steele. Anderson was referring to the use of Stefan Halper. Anderson was very careful during her testimony but at times her statements were contradicted by testimony from other individuals interviewed by the House committees. Her involvement in matters relating to both the Clinton and Trump investigations exceeded what had been publicly known and appears to have been at a level comparable to that of her former boss, FBI General Counsel James Baker. Now, just being a normal human being with regular average intelligence, I look at this and it sounds to me like she is significantly avoiding the question of whether people were placed in the campaign to actively spy from within the campaign. This answer, does a spy include an undercover FBI employee? So in this question, does a spy in your mind include a human confidential source? There is an answer, no. Does a spy include an undercover FBI employee? I don't know. How do you not know if, in your opinion, if your definition of a spy doesn't include an FBI undercover employee? Now remember that when we talk about Carter Page. Now, moving on to where we were going to start. Who is Mueller indicting? Let's start with Manafort. I personally believe, in my opinion, that Paul Manafort was actively recruited and put into the campaign. And it has to do with this. Right? So we're talking about leverage. Someone had leverage over Paul Manafort, and it's very clear that this happened when you read the indictment and pay attention. But in February 16th, Manafort approached Donald Trump through a mutual friend. Nobody was trying to hire Manafort. Manafort reached out to somebody he knew that knew Donald Trump, that he knew Donald Trump trusted, to get into the campaign in or around in February. And then in March, he was joined the campaign. Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, and Paul Manafort all joined the campaign in March around the same time. And it was in response to questions by the Washington Post and the New York Times about his foreign policy teams. Now, a person who was thinking and not just listening might think, wow, the Washington Post and the New York Times work with the government and the CIA and the DOJ and the FBI all the time. It's in the OIG report. This is not, I'm not misstating anything factual. The OIG report has the one FBI agent talking to 35 different reporters from the New York Times and the Washington Post. So this is not factual. So is it possible that the New York Times and the Washington Post were pushing Trump to name foreign policy advisors because the government had foreign policy advisors ready to go into his campaign? Is that possible? Now, the Manafort thing is a different thing. He was hired to get delegates. He sold himself as, I've worked on presidential campaigns before. I know everybody in the Republican Party. I can get this done. Now, interesting enough, in the Manafort indictment, everything in this indictment has to do with things happening between 2006 and 2014, or maybe 15. The person who would have been in charge of this indictment or this investigation most likely would have been Andrew Weissman in the tax and fraud division, because this is a tax and fraud investigation. This investigation had been going on for a very long period of time. Bob Mueller did not, from May 17th until October 30th, in 5 months with 16, 17 people, gather 10 years of evidence of transactions going back to 2006, 7, 8, and 9. I mean, look at these wires. Look at all of these wires, 6,500. You think that they're finding all of these wires and all of this information in 5 months to bring an indictment forward after a grand jury? No. All of this work was already done. It's my opinion that Paul Manafort, and why this thing looks awful with Paul Manafort, it's my opinion that Paul Manafort was in a pickle. The government was investigating him. He had a case against him, and he was trying to lessen the blow. So they were using him to try to gain information about the Trump campaign. Now, I don't believe that Manafort necessarily understood the full breadth and depth of exactly what was going on. But Manafort supposedly has contacts in Ukraine and Russia, and he knows all these people in Russia. So if you're trying to frame somebody for Russian collusion, wouldn't you want to put people who have known contacts with Russians into the campaign after you've conducted an investigation on them for years, showing all of their crimes? The other thing that's interesting about the indictment is it says on 11/23, let me get down here so I can read this exactly and get this perfect for you. I mean, this stuff's crazy. I mean, it's literally crazy. Count 12. On or about November 23rd, 2016 and February 10th, 2017, within the District of Columbia and elsewhere, in a matter within the jurisdiction of the executive branch of government of the United States, Paul Manafort, Richard Gates, knowingly and willfully did cause another to falsify, conceal, cover up a scheme and device in a material fact to make materially false, fictitious, fraudulent statement and representation. Okay, so they're making false statements on or around November 23rd, 2016. Well, looky here. November 30th, 2016, Paul Manafort is back and advising Donald Trump on cabinet picks. Okay? So let's think about this. He's lying to investigators on November 23rd, 2016. And on November 30th, 2016, he's back in the campaign. And he's on the transition now, advising on cabinet picks. Now, if you wanted to destroy the Trump presidency from within, would you get someone who you had a boat ton of leverage? I mean, Paul Manafort is most likely going to spend the rest of his life in jail. That's leverage. That is leverage, my friends. And we will take all of your stuff and you will go to jail for the rest of your life. That is the definition of swamp leverage. Now, he's lying to them on the 23rd, and on the 30th, he's reportedly advising the campaign on who to select for the cabinet. Now, we've had some issues with the cabinet early on in the campaign. We've had leakers. We've had liars. We've had problems with the staff in the White House. Is it possible that they were exerting their leverage on Paul Manafort to get him to put their chosen people in to run their agenda so that Trump couldn't be successful and they could take him down as president? Or maybe they were trying to get at least close to 5 or 6 cabinet people so that if they wanted to invoke the 25th Amendment, they had people on their side? That's possible. I don't know if it's probable, but it is possible. Moving on to Mr. Carter Page. The other thing about Paul Manafort that I will say that I don't want to gloss over. But Manafort was doing this, he was with the campaign, and then he got outed as this Russian person by somebody at the Post or the Times in August, and then Trump had to fire him. How do you think the person at the newspaper got the information about the stuff that he did with Ukraine? Because that's all part of the investigation that Weissman was doing. So if I'm Manafort and I go and I try to get into this campaign and then somebody leaks information that outs me, most likely in response to Manafort not being able to get any information, They're probably like, where's the information? Where's the Russia collusion? We need you to create Russia collusion. Listen, man, I helped have the meeting with the lawyers. I don't know what to do. I can't just create Russians and put them in the campaign. So they leak something to get him out because they're mad at him. And they want to exert more leverage and power. They come back. They start having meetings with him on November 23rd. He gets put back into the transition. They're trying to get people into the campaign because now Donald Trump won. So, let's go. Let's try to get people on the cabinet. So if I'm Manafort and this happened to me, I am pissed off, royally pissed off. And as I rot in that jail cell, I want to tell the world everything. But I can't because they still have the leverage. So I'm very, very fascinated by this whole subject. And there's too much. It's like Jesse Smollett, which has become like crack to me, by the way. I love Jesse. We're going to do more talk about Jesse. I thought I was going to be done with him on Monday, but we're coming back. But in any case, it just is wrapped up too nicely and neatly. All of it. Now, moving on to Carter Page. Carter Page is an interesting cat. This guy, by all reporting and everything that you read and see, he looks kind of like a bumbling idiot. Like he just kind of smiles and doesn't really say much of substance and doesn't seem like there's a lot there to him. So the history of Carter Page. Page graduated with a BS degree from the United States Naval Academy in 1993. He graduated with distinction, top 10% of his class, and was chosen for the Navy's Trident Scholar Program, which gives selected officers the opportunity for independent academic research and study. During his senior year at the Naval Academy, he worked at the office of Les Aspin, a researcher for the House Armed Services Committee. He served in the Navy for 5 years, including a tour in Western Morocco as an intelligence officer for a United Nations peacekeeping mission, and attained the rank of lieutenant. In 1994, he completed an MA in National Security Studies at Georgetown. After leaving active duty in 1998, Page was a member of the Navy's inactive reserve until 2004. After leaving the Navy, Page completed a fellowship at the Council on Foreign Relations. Great organization there. And in 2001, received an MBA degree from NYU. In 2000, he began work as an investment banker with Merrill Lynch in the firm's London office, was a vice president in the company's Moscow office, later served as COO for Merrill Lynch's Energy and Power Department in New York. Page has stated that he worked on transactions involving Gazprom, and other leading Russian energy companies. According to business people interviewed by Politico in 2016, Page's work in Moscow was at a subordinate level, and he himself remained largely unknown to decision makers. Now, I don't know much about anything really, but if you're going to the Navy Academy, you're not a dumb person in general. If you're graduating in the top 10% of your class, you're certainly not a dumb person. And then you're an intelligence officer and you have a history of being an intelligence officer. Carter Page has a scar down his face. This man is a bad dude, and I would not want to mess with him because he would kill me in less than 1 second. Somebody took a knife to the man's face. I would hate to see what happened to that person. Now, all this being said, he in 1998, he left the Navy. By 2001, he completed a fellowship at the Council of Foreign Relations, received an MBA from NYU, and worked full-time as an investment banker with Merrill Lynch in the firm's London office. So he was in London and New York, going to school, getting an MBA. He's not a dumb person, but he looks like a dumb person. He sounds like a dumb person. Like when you listen to him talk, you're like, man, this guy just seems like a doofus. And he's clearly cannot be. These things, we're looking at a Venn diagram. These things are mutually exclusive. You can't be a dumb guy and do all of this stuff that he's done. It's just not possible. And even the Russians that he helped capture, that he helped indict, said he was dumb, but he's not. So the FISA was issued on him after he left the campaign, like right after, like a couple days. So I'm assuming that they probably extracted him from the campaign so that they could ensure that they would get the FISA through. Going back to what Ms. Anderson said, because of who he was. Now, there's this disputed story about Carter Page. Was Carter Page an undercover informant? Now, in his defense, he denies this. But let's look at it. The theory goes that Page, an energy consultant, worked undercover for the FBI to bug a covert Kremlin agent. But Page dispelled that speculation on Tuesday, telling the Daily Caller News Foundation, "I never did anything of that variety." What kind of answer is that? If someone asked me if I was a spy, I'd say, no, I'm not a spy. I never did anything of that variety. It certainly sounds like he's done things of some variety in the spycraft world. Now, again, moving forward in this article, Republicans have argued that Page was unfairly targeted because the dossier is largely unverified. Democrats have countered that a spy warrant on Page was justified because of his past interactions with Russians, including those he had in 2013 with a covert Russian agent named Viktor Papadopoulos. Amid that debate, there has been growing speculation that Page is the undercover FBI agent identified in court documents related to the prosecution of Papadopoulos' spy ring. It has already been reported that Page was interviewed by the FBI in June 2013 about contacts he had with Papadopoulos, who worked covertly as a Russian trade representative to the United Nations. Page is described as male one in a sealed complaint filed in 2015 against Papadopoulos and his associates, including Igor Sportnishev, a Russian trade representative. Male one stated that he first met Viktor Papadopoulos, the defendant, in January 2013 at an energy symposium in New York City, reads the complaint, which was leaked to BuzzFeed News last year. Page told FBI agents that he had limited interactions with Papadopoulos and was never recruited as a Russian agent. After meeting at the energy conference, he said he provided the Russian operative with a few of his academic writings. They exchanged emails and met once more, Page told the agents. The FBI has never suggested that Page was a target of its investigation of the spy ring, but his name emerged after a copy of the sealed court document was leaked to BuzzFeed News last April. Days later, government officials leaked the information that a FISA warrant was granted against Page shortly after he left the Trump campaign. If it was granted after he left the Trump campaign, why is Trish Anderson worried about who Carter Page is and the FISA warrant? The idea that Page also worked undercover in the case gained steam over the weekend after the release of the FISA memo. Internet sleuths drew attention to a March 11, 2016. This is right before he joined the campaign. Press release from the Justice Department that described an FBI undercover employee who bugged Sportnishev, the Russian trade representative. The FBI obtained recordings after Sportnishev attempted to recruit an FBI undercover employee, UCE1, who was posing as an analyst from a New York-based energy company, the press release states. In response to requests from Sportnishev, UCE1 provided Sportnishev with binders containing purported industry analysis written by UCE1 and supporting documentation relating to UCE1's reports, as well as covertly placed recording devices. Now that sounds a whole heck of a lot like I met him once and I gave him some of my papers that I read. Part of the description matches up with what's known about Page, including that he worked as an energy analyst. An article at Red State analyzed Page's role in a spy ring case in the Justice Department press release and surmised that unless there is a significant piece missing to what has been made public, male one is UCE1 is Carter Page. But Page poured cold water on the theory. I'm not very familiar with the whole UCE concept. Again, talking in this language that doesn't make sense. He initially told the Daily Caller News Foundation when he asked if he had heard the rumors he was an undercover FBI agent. I would assume that I'd have been briefed if I were somehow in it. Told that the undercover agent planted recording devices in order to surveil. Page said, well, that settles that. I never did anything of that variety. This is a weird way to speak in general. I don't understand the whole UCE concept. I mean, it's an undercover employee. It's not a concept. It's an employee of the FBI who works undercover. And guess what? If you ask a spy if they're a spy, they're going to say no. They're going to say no. That's what they do. They're spies. They don't want their cover blown. Now, an interesting part of this, the energy consulting company that he owns, it's a one-man operation. He left Merrill in 2008 to start his own company. The company has one employee, him, and works out of a shared office space with a booking agency for weddings and bands. In 2008, he left Merrill to do his own thing. In 2016, it's reported that he had yet to realize a project. How in the heck is this guy supporting himself, working in an energy consulting firm that probably deals with, secret information, and he shares it with a booking agency for weddings and bands in Manhattan, and he hasn't booked a deal in 13 or 9 years, 8 years. It doesn't make any sense. How are these people not doing business, not getting paid, flying all around the world, and they share space with a booking agency? Papadopoulos is another one that I am suspicious of. Now, Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn headed the Defense Intelligence Agency, and Obama hated him. And as you should know, and if you don't, during the Obama administration, Obama took a lot of power away from military and military intelligence and gave it to the CIA, because the CIA was headed by the corrupt John Brennan and was doing Obama's dirty work all over the world, like flying cash all over the place and then having people give that cash back to him so that he can buy $10 million mansions in Washington, D.C., after being president for 8 years and making $400,000 a year and not having a job. So, that all sounds realistic. And, so Obama hated Flynn. He fired Flynn. Flynn lied, quote unquote, about his contacts with then Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak after Obama. Here's the thing. What did Obama think was going to happen when he expelled 35 Russian diplomats or spies, however you want to look at it, most likely spies? We let spies come into our country. As long as we know they're here, they're allowed to be here. They just have to register as a foreign agent, so we know where they are and we can listen to them. So what did he think was going to happen when he expelled 35 people, spies or otherwise? Was Sergei Kislyak, the ambassador from Russia, going to call Susan Rice and ask her what the plan going forward was for the next 21 days? Or was he going to call the incoming administration? They already had Flynn on FISA. I'm certain of it. If not, they chose this Russia thing to get the phone call recorded, because any ambassador or anything like that, that stuff is spied on and looked at in real time. If you sign a FARA form and you're in this country, that you're spied on and looked at in real time at all times. So Flynn knew that if Kislyak's calling him, because he was at the DIA, he worked at the NSA, he understands what goes on. He knew if Kislyak's calling him that he's being listened to. He also knew when the FBI agents came that they had a transcript of the call. And he even referenced, hey, don't you guys have this? Shouldn't you guys have this information? Why are you asking me about it? He didn't even understand that they were trying to get him to lie. He didn't understand he was under investigation. He wasn't read any rights. He didn't have an attorney present. It's a sham. Why is it a sham? Because they couldn't have Mike Flynn, who knows where all the freaking bodies are buried, existing in the White House when they probably just bugged the whole thing. They probably have a bunch of stuff that he knows that would negatively impact them and their ability to continue the insurance policy. Now, Flynn's charge is lying to the FBI about a conversation he had with a Russian ambassador. And here is from the defendant sentencing memo. So these are Flynn's lawyers. He participated in 5 pre-plea proffer sessions with the special counsel's office and 14 additional meetings with the government pursuant to the plea agreement entered on December 1, 2017. In total, he participated in 19 meetings with the special counsel's office and other components of the government, totaling approximately 62 hours and 45 minutes. How could he possibly talk? Let's just say, for instance, that everyone who is a detractor of what I'm saying will say that what we're going to talk about next means that Flynn is helping and Trump's going down. How could he possibly talk for 62 hours about the Trump campaign and his contacts with Putin at a dinner where Putin came and sat down for 5 seconds and then they took a picture of him next to the table? I'd be willing to bet that's staged too. All of this was an information operation campaign executed at the highest levels of our government by our government against our people. It was Venezuela. This is our moment right now. It's the only chance we have. How could he talk about Sergei Kislyak, a 30-second interaction with Putin, not even with Putin. Putin just sat down at the table for a photo op for 62 hours and 45 minutes. Produced thousands of documents to the Department of Justice. Even before his voluntary pre-plea proffer sessions, he had chosen to produce sweeping categories of documents held by his 2 companies, rather than fight over the breadth of subpoenas, and facilitated the production of electronic devices. After his plea agreement, he made another 5 productions of documents. What could he possibly have in the possession of his 2 companies in that volume over a 8-month campaign? I mean, Trump started campaigning in 15, like June of 15, July of 15, whenever it was. November 16 is the election. Flynn came on. He was with other people first. He came on in January, I think. So 9 months, 11 months he was with them. And he has thousands of documents and 70 hours of testimony to give. I mean, that's 2 work weeks. 2 work weeks of testimony about a conversation that he had with Sergei Kislyak in the Dominican after Obama expelled 35 people. Does this make sense? It makes sense to me that this doesn't make sense. I don't know exactly what the answer is. I'm not going to tell you that I know for a fact anything. This is my opinion that none of it makes sense and that there's other things going on here that we are unaware of. Now, let's look at the addendum to the sentencing memo. This addendum to the government's memorandum in aid of sentencing describes the significance and usefulness of Michael Flynn's assistance to the government and the timeliness of that assistance. As described herein, the defendant's assistance to the government was substantial and merits consideration at sentencing. Significance and usefulness of the defendant's assistance. The defendant assisted with several ongoing investigations. A criminal investigation into what? 10, 12 words? The special counsel's office investigation concerning any links or coordination between the Russian government officials associated with the campaign of Donald Trump. So this is the original scope memo completely unredacted. And then this, we don't even get what type of investigation it is. Here we got a criminal investigation. Here we don't even get what type of investigation it is, but there's a comma, so there is a separate whole line item of investigation written here. What is that? Is it obstruction of justice for Donald Trump using his Article 2 granted authority as commander-in-chief to fire Jim Comey? Jim Comey got fired after Flynn left. Flynn was in the administration for 20 days. So if you believe what you read in the media or hear on the news, that there's this obstruction case and this and that, Flynn isn't helping with those things because Flynn was not in the picture at that point in time. The only thing he could help with related to Donald Trump is the election, which is completely unredacted. Participated in 19 interviews with the SEO or attorneys from other DOJ offices, provided documents and communications blank. So this is the information about the blank criminal investigation. The defendant has provided substantial assistance in a criminal investigation. That's it. Now here is the special counsel's investigation. Now here it talks about the scope memo, presidential transition team in Russia. Now this is redacted. We don't know what that is. Who knows? Maybe it has to do with the Roger Stone case. I don't know. What else is ongoing? Nobody knows. So, interactions between the transition and Russia. Russian ambassador. Here's the communication between him and the Russian ambassador involving sanctions. And then here you have one line, one or two sentences redacted at the end, which could be about a lot of things involving anything from the campaign, right? Or the transition. Actually, this would be in the transition period. The defendant also provided information concerning. Now, what this says to me is there's a lot of stuff out here. Here's a fact. A fact. Michael Flynn is a freaking patriot who loves his country and would do anything to protect it and save it from any threat. That is a fact. I don't know what it says underneath these lines, but what I do know is that Michael Flynn is a patriot, and there are people trying to attack our country that we don't know about from within. And there's a whole lot of black stuff in here, and Michael Flynn is the person who would be in the position to know it as the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and all of his intelligence work over the years. Papa D! George Papadopoulos. This guy is interesting to me. He's just very interesting. I don't know if I can sit here and say with strong opinion what I believe about him and who he is, but I'm going to give you what I really think is most likely. I'm not going to sit here and say that I would bet all of my political capital, if I had any, on this. But that being said, everything about this guy screams spy. This is another guy who has no job, but he's talking with prime ministers, other spies. He goes to spy colleges. He speaks 4 languages. Now, really probably 2, because you would expect he would speak English and Greek. His parents are Greek immigrants. Greek people have a strong culture. They speak Greek at home. They speak Greek in their family. That happens. So I would expect that he would know 2 languages. But knowing French and Arabic, what does he need to know Arabic for? As a research fellow at the Hudson Institute, that's an unpaid position. So he was an unpaid intern at the Hudson Institute from 2011 to 15. For 4 years, he was unpaid, living in London. Now, I haven't been to London, I'll be honest, but I hear it's expensive. If anyone knows, put it in the comments. But I think London's expensive. I would think it would be hard to live somewhere for 4 years as an unpaid intern. Again, another oil, gas, and policy consultant like Carter Page. I think that the CIA and the FBI might have been playing swords. If you're a guy, you might know what I'm talking about. In their spying operations and potentially accidentally got some people caught up in nets that they weren't supposed to be. He goes to Link. He knows Mifsud. After he was discovered, he meets his girlfriend through Mifsud and then marries her within 9. They're married and engaged within like 6 weeks. Or they meet and are engaged within 6 weeks, and then within 7 months they're married. This girl is marrying this guy who is in the national news about being, a Russian colluder. Who's most likely gonna go to jail, but she marries him because that's normal. People always marry people who are in the news for being criminals. He gets given $10,000. So this is the part where I say the swords are crossed. He's out, on some island nation meeting with some top diplomat because he's an unpaid intern and, isn't a spy. And he gets $10,000 from this guy. And then he gives it to his attorney on this island. This guy has no job, volunteers for everybody, and has attorneys in different countries. Think about that. I don't even have one attorney, let alone attorneys in different countries that I can just go to when someone hands me $10,000 in cash, because that happens all the time. People always give people who have no job $10,000 in cash to do work. Now, this is where, back to the swords crossing. I think that was a setup because he got arrested coming back from that trip in the airport, and it was a probable cause arrest. So the way arrests work at the federal level is there's two types of arrests. There's a probable cause arrest and there's a warrant arrest. Federal agents use warrant arrests. They aren't out on the street seeing crimes happen. So they don't, they can't just go and, a policeman who is on the beat, who rides in a car, gives tickets. He has probable cause arrests. He sees something happen, he goes and stops it and arrests the person and then goes back and writes the report. Federal investigators investigate, write the report, present it to either a grand jury or a prosecutor who presents it to a grand jury, and then they get a warrant, and then they come knock on your door at 6 a.m. and beat it down because you're 67 years old, right? That's what they do. So Papadopoulos gets arrested in the airport by Peter Strzok on a probable cause arrest, and they were asking him about money. They were looking at his customs form to see if he declared the $10,000. They were searching his bag. They continued to ask if he had any cash. So maybe Papa D is a CIA operative, and the FBI did not get that memo and arrested him. That makes sense to me with the way that this went down and who he is. I mean, again, all of these people were recycled through campaigns. They're all coming from other campaigns, and then they all end up on Donald Trump's campaign. We know that Obama was most likely spying on all of the Republican candidates for Hillary. And just to talk a little bit about Papa D, and this goes into, the $10,000 from the foreign national that he believed was a spy. Of course, I believe Papadopoulos is a spy. None of it makes sense. How does Papadopoulos end up in a barroom with Alexander Downer? It doesn't make sense. That didn't happen to any other low-level campaign volunteers. Why wasn't Roger Stone in the in the thing. Now here, Papadopoulos told Congress the FBI asked him to spy on mystery professor at Center of Collusion probe. The FBI is now, after they arrest him, asking him to wear a wire and talk to Mifsud. And then they say because he won't wear a wire, if you remember about his indictment, they said that decisions that he made, this is why he spent 14 days in jail, prevented them from getting Mifsud, who is clearly a Western intelligence asset. Papadopoulos expressed skepticism in his congressional interview about the FBI's request for him to wear a wire. He said the request was extremely problematic because he now believes that Mifsud may have been working for Western intelligence agencies instead of Russia. Papadopoulos bases that assessment on claims made by Stephen Rowe, a European attorney who represents Mifsud. Rowe told the DCNF that Mifsud has links to Western intelligence. Rowe has also said that Mifsud did not tell Papadopoulos about Russians having Clinton emails. Mifsud has widely been seen as closer to Russia. That's because he sought to arrange meetings through Papadopoulos between the Trump campaign and Russian government officials. The special counsel's office has disclosed that the meetings never materialized. Mifsud's affiliations remain one of the central mysteries of the collusion investigation, but answers have been hard to come by, given that Mifsud has not been heard from since November 2017. What happened in November 2017? The Saudi purge. Q comes out at the end of October. These indictments start rolling in at the beginning of October, the calm before the storm meeting. And then Mifsud vanishes into thin air. Papadopoulos has denied colluding with Mifsud or Russians. He claims he did not see, handle, or disseminate any Clinton-related emails. He also says he does not recall telling anyone in the Trump campaign about Mifsud's remarks. Now, this guy is interesting. First of all, Mifsud introduced him to his wife. He knew Mifsud long before the election. He's known Mifsud since, if you count from the election, he knew him. I think he started hanging out with Mifsud in 2010 or 11. So this guy has known Mifsud. He knows exactly who Mifsud is. Now, Trump doesn't know he knows Mifsud. And it doesn't matter to the CIA if he knows Mifsud, because all the CIA is trying to do is get someone in the Trump campaign to talk about Russia collusion and Hillary's emails so they can extract that information and then present it to Congress and the FBI via John Brennan. This was a sophisticated operation from the beginning. From the beginning. Now, when talking about Mueller and all of this sham stuff, I mean, all this stuff is shammy. None of it makes any sense. There's a lot of stuff that does make sense, but it's speculation. So where do we go from here? And why is Mueller the fake investigation, and who is the real investigation? Mystery surrounds Sessions appointee to FBI investigation. Attorney General Jeff Sessions quietly tapped Huber apparently last fall to work in tandem with Justice Department's Inspector General to determine whether conservative allegations of abuse at the FBI and the Justice Department merit investigation. Now let's think about this for a second. At the time when this happened also around October 2017. All of this stuff starts in October 2017 as far as the offensive and the new information war campaign where we're actually trying to get the truth out to the people, right? So let me ask you. We have to go back to this. The DC ratio, 22-1, 91% voted for Hillary Clinton. If you're going to run an investigation on Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, Barack Obama, and all of the treason and corruption committed by the DC swamp, Are you going to appoint a special counsel who has 17 attorneys and works in the swamp where your entire jury, where 90% of your jury pool doesn't even believe that you are the president of the United States? Is that the smart thing to do? Is that what smart people do? Or do smart people appoint this guy who Obama appointed originally? This is an Obama appointee. It is an Obama appointee. He works in Utah. The grand juries that he creates are in Utah of normal human beings that don't live in D.C., in a state that Trump won. Huber is running the actual investigation. And guess what? Huber doesn't have a team of 17 attorneys. Do you know how many attorneys and investigators work in the Office of the Inspector General for the Department of Justice? 476. I believe they got another 50 at the beginning of last year, so maybe it's more. But from what I remember, it's 476. Don't quote me. It might be off by a little bit. But in general, he has 476 people investigating this. They have 77, 78, 79, 80, however many thousand indictments under seal, or orders under seal in the U.S. court system. They've been doing this for a very long period of time. We're coming close. All of these leaks of this testimony wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for that. It's an unusual arrangement and one that falls short of demands from the right that Sessions name a second special counsel. The idea has generated controversy, with critics saying the second appointee would inevitably impede the work of the special counsel, Robert Mueller. Again, so when we look at the special counsel, there is no illusion that it is not impartial. It is very partial. It's now 12 or 13 angry Democrats who all donated to Hillary Clinton's campaign going after Trump. Why would they want another one of those in D.C.? It doesn't make sense to have a special counsel operating out of D.C. in the swamp where it can be easily manipulated. The reason that Bob Mueller has those Democrats on his team, because any normal investigation wants to make sure that there is no even appearance of a conflict of interest. There are so many conflicts on this Mueller team, you can't even count them. Weissman has 50 conflicts of his own. Why would you create an investigative team that's doing a real investigation that is so conflicted that you would get overturned on appeal? They're not really prosecuting any of the cases. They didn't really expect any of the cases to go to prosecution. They expected all these people to plead because they knew Page was a spy. They knew Papadopoulos, well, they probably didn't know Papadopoulos was a spy because they arrested him in a weird way, but they should have known Papadopoulos was a spy. They just messed that one up. And then they have Manafort, who was supposed to be a double agent working for them, who is now just pissed off and not playing ball. Right? They're investigating people that aren't real, with people that, if they actually went to trial, would get overturned on conflict of interest because it is against DOJ ethics and policy and written into special counsel law that you can't have a conflict. So there's no public details. This guy has been hidden from view. If you remember, he was scheduled to testify in front of the Republican either Judiciary or Joint House Oversight Judiciary Committee on December something. Then I think George H.W. Bush passed away, and then he just vanished. He was in D.C. for like a day or two. The only thing we know is he met with Horowitz, and he vanished again. Nobody knows who the guy is. Nobody can get to the guy. There are no leaks coming from it. which is what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like there is no investigation going on. Because you can't have an investigation until you have exoneration. Indictments are coming. People are going to be held accountable. I don't know if it's going to be in 30 days or 3 months or a year, but you better believe it'll be before the 2020 election. Because Trump has all the leverage, he has all the information and all the power, and he is going to return the leverage, information, and power back to us, the people of the United States of America. Thanks so much for listening today. I know this was long, but these are 2 very important videos. None of it, you have to look at everything critically and say, does this make sense in the real world? It makes sense in the old real world. We've got one shot right now, people, to take back our country for good. Because if we don't, AOC's coming and Bernie's coming. And they want to take over everything and make you eat Russian dressing every day for lunch. I don't know about you, but I prefer ranch. For Participation Nation, this is Ricky Skittle, and I'm out.